Hello everyone, in this video we're going to talk about the difference between the Russia-Ukraine war and the Israel-Hamas war. Why I strongly support one, and namely the Israel's war against Hamas, and I do not support the other one. I'm still rooting, quote unquote, for Ukraine to win, but I wouldn't advocate American involvement and either financial or even moral support for that. I think we should be completely neutral on that. So a lot of people conflate the two. They think that if we support one, we should support the other. Indeed, in the most recent budget, there was an attempt to link the two. So essentially the Democrats were saying we're not going to fund Israel unless we also fund Ukraine, and the Republicans were they wanted to fund Israel, but not necessarily as much funding Ukraine. So let me tell you why, in my opinion, and I diverge from mainstream Republican, the Republican position on this. Okay, now of course we all know that Trump does make this distinction that I'm about to make, but the mainstream Republican position, as manifested, as expressed, for example, by the National Review, is that the two are in fact related, and if you support one, you should support the other. So like I said, I don't believe that's the case, and here's why. What we need to do, the first thing we need to do in order to analyze this is we need to peel back the layers and go back to the beginning as to how these conflicts evolved in the first place and why America is even involved in this in the first place. Now, in the case of Russia versus Ukraine, the reason we're involved in that is because Russia used to be our enemy. Russia used to be enemy number one. If you go back 50 years ago, during the height of the Soviet Union, Russia was, of course, the chief protagonist within the Soviet Union. They are the ones who essentially started the communist movement, and they influenced all these other satellite countries to join them and form this union of Soviet socialist republics. And of course, it was a communist. It was a communist union. Right? It promoted communism and it propagated that ideal across the world. And it wanted to exert, it was a very aggressive entity. And, workers of the world unite, okay? So this was a serious threat to the United States. I don't want to go into too many details, but suffice it to say that I agree that during the 50s and 60s, Russia was a serious threat. And I understand why, how, etc. I don't want to go into it, but that's the origin of our opposition to Russia. Okay, so those who want us to support Ukraine are subconsciously, okay, if you read between the lines, that's really what they're saying. Hey, Russia is our enemy. They don't say why. I'll get back to this in a moment. But hey, we got to support Ukraine because Ukraine is, the enemy of our enemy is our friend. Okay. Whereas now let's take a look at the Israel-Hamas war. Now, it's very, very important to understand. I think most people do not get this. They do not get the profundity of what's involved, what's at stake here. Hamas is not just a local actor. Hamas is 100% supported by Iran on this. If not for Iran, Hamas wouldn't exist. Okay, they would be extinct. They're funded and they are supported morally as well by Iran. Now, it's interesting to note that Hamas itself is actually an Arabic entity. Iran is not. Also, Hamas is actually Sunni aligned, and Iran is Shia. So they're actually different in many ways, but Iran is using them as pawns. Iran is using them as pawns to exert its influence and control, and Iran has a very assertive foreign policy. They want to, take over and control, and whatever their objective is, the point is that they're a very assertive entity, and it's a jihadist entity. It's an entity that believes in jihad, it believes in Islam. Okay, it's an Islamist entity. It believes Sharia, meaning that Sharia should be the rule of law. Okay, Islamic law should be the state law. All right, I mean, everyone is aware of that. There's no democracy in Iran. You don't vote there because democracy is not an Islamist institution. So Iran is definitely an aggressive, anti-Western country, and it's using Hamas to further its ambitions, whatever they may be. Again, anti-Western ambitions. That's really what's at stake here. Okay. Now, if not for this, if not for Iran, and if not for its overall goal of negating Western influence in the world, the Israel-Hamas war would not have happened. Hamas would not have any power in Gaza. Okay, so that's important to understand. So I guess the next question needs to be is why is it important for America to be involved in this? And the answer to this is that unlike Russia, which I'll get back to in a moment, Islamism is a very nefarious idea. It is very harmful to society. I don't need to go into too many details, but suffice it to say that not only is it anti-democracy and anti-liberty, but it also literally puts people to death for, relatively innocent things that happen to be antithetical to Islam. I mean, we've all seen and heard the stories of this happens in Afghanistan and other places, in Pakistan. Sometimes they'll put a woman to death, they'll stone her or whatever for certain things that she did, that in the West, we're like, what? You're going to kill your own family member for this? But yeah, in Arabic countries, that this happens. So these are some very serious divergences from Western ideals that is going on in these countries. And I think ultimately we definitely, and the other thing to keep in mind is that we do have economic interests in the Middle East. Mainly it's oil related, but there are others as well. So the point being here is that if we have an entire Middle East that is hostile to us, which is what Iran wants, right, then that would definitely hurt America economically and politically. So that's our interest in opposing Iran. Now, let's take Russia now. Let's take a look at Russia and see if our original opposition to Russia, which was rooted in our anti-communist war, does that still stand? Does that still have any relevance in the 21st century? And the answer is no, it doesn't. Keep in mind that unlike Islamism and jihadism, which has only gotten stronger over the last few decades, and Iran, broadly speaking, has gotten stronger in the last few decades, unlike that, what Russia represented, which was communism, has not only has it waned, has it gotten weaker, but it doesn't practically exist. Like even China, which supposedly still has a communist party, quote unquote, the regime is not actually communist. Now it's true, it's not democratic, that is true, but it's not communist. Communism is dead. There is no major country and there's no serious thinker who still thinks that communism is the way to go. And so our opposition to Russia is just completely extinct. It's no longer potent. It no longer has any relevancy in the modern era. Now, it is true that relative to Western Europe, relative to countries like Germany, France, Italy, Spain, England, relative to those countries, Russia has cultural differences. Of course, they're part, for example, of the Orthodox Church versus the Catholic and Protestant churches. And of course, they're the Slavic people versus more Aryan people, which is closer to our blood, American blood. So there are differences. But, we're the country of diversity. So that shouldn't be the basis of anything. We have so many religions and so many different peoples here. That's not the reason that we are opposed to Russia. And so bottom line is that there is no legitimacy and there's no validity to a modern day opposition to Russia. So now, should we somewhat side with Ukraine on this, trying to separate itself from Russia's legacy, from the influence that Russia had exerted over it during the Soviet era and trying to become closer to NATO? I guess we can sympathize in the privacy of our own houses if we have a discussion over the dinner table, I suppose, okay? I suppose it doesn't hurt to sympathize with a entity that is more aligned with your ideals than the other. But to support it diplomatically, publicly, especially with money and military aid, that's a complete no-no. That is definitely uncalled for. If you think about it, we're talking here hundreds of billion, more than $100 billion, if I'm not mistaken, has been given to Ukraine. That's a lot of money. That's for each American household. If you apportion the burden to each American household, it comes out to a good few $1,000s. That's a lot of money. Like, imagine if you ask an American, do you support Ukraine or Russia? Okay, why not? Yeah. But are you willing to pay $6,000 a year for that? And remember, with all American wars, it's never just a one-time payment, right? Okay, remember, this is the big mistake that Bush made with Iraq. They thought it was going to be over in 3 months. No, it's not over in 3 months, okay? There's an insurgency. There's continued fighting. It goes on forever, okay? And the same thing is with the war in Ukraine. Are you willing to pay $6,000 a year? I don't know if that's the exact number, but let's say it's $6,000. Are you willing to pay that in order to support Ukraine? Heck no. Heck no. We don't want that. So like I said, and it's not just a visceral thing that we don't want that. It's just that there's no logical benefit from it. Like, what do we get out of it? Why? What do we have against Russia? This is a local skirmish between two entities that has nothing to do with us. Again, this is not a very good juxtaposition to Israel and Hamas. In that case, in the case of Israel versus Hamas, if Hamas wins, Iran wins. If Iran wins, the entire Middle East becomes Islamist. Islamist means you have Sharia law encoded and embedded in the country's secular laws. Okay, so namely, this is something that's it's seismic. Okay, this is something very big, and it's not something that we want. Yes, it is true that we're separated from them by a vast ocean, etc., etc. But like I said, we have an interest in preventing that from happening. So thank you for watching. I hope you understand why I support Israel's war against Hamas and not Ukraine against Russia. Thank you very much. Enjoy your day.